Everybody. I hope you're having a good evening. This is Ramon, bold like a leopard, and the topic tonight, and I'm trying to gather all the strings together. Has been a busy day. I've been getting everything ready since probably around 9:30, because honestly, there. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. Trying to. Sorry about that. I just fed through my own feed. You can probably tell that I haven't done a lot of these live broadcasts before, but all right, that should be fine. I don't think we're going to get more of these, me looping myself into my own broadcast. But we're kind of seeing, as the topic suggests, this real issue with the U.S. media, where they are ginning up a lot of controversy regarding our own domestic policy at the moment, even though there's not much to really talk about. I mean, we're talking about a meeting that happened last year during an election that, in the grand scheme of things, didn't lead to much between the son of a presidential candidate who ended up getting elected and a person who nobody actually knows what was her role, if any, in the Russian government. But meanwhile, and I have a video up already. It's the first in a series, and I'm going to keep going probably through the weekend, making some of these videos between work and Saturday. I don't do anything. Friday night, Saturday, I don't release anything. But this live stream, and I'm going to try to monitor the chat if I can. This live stream is kind of an introduction. We have a real problem right now where the media is misrepresenting the real priorities of this country. And, if, people don't see this now, you can come back later and tune in and tune into some of my other videos that are going to be released in this sequence, because we're seeing Venezuela completely tottering and falling apart. We're seeing Brazil convict the former president of bribery. And the other president that was removed last year, Dilma Rousseff, she's also probably going to stand trial also for a laundry list of not capital crimes, but some of the worst corruption that you've ever seen in your life. And what's the common thread through all of this? You have these people that have absolutely no self-respect. They're socialists. They claim their entire careers to be fighting for the people. Some of them are ex-guerrillas. In the case of Venezuela, you have a bus driver as president. In the case of Cuba, you have the brother of a former dictator who himself was one of his brutal executioners in the 60s, and he's still in power. And it's been upwards of 50 years since Cuba's had they didn't have representative government before, but they've had 50 years to implement something that really represents the will of the Cuban people. Who do they have? This guy who I think is over 90 years old. Raul Castro. And I think that the media is deliberately misrepresenting what is going on today because they don't want to admit that this old dynamic of politics, where you always needed an enemy and there had to be like another country to be your like main squeeze, if you want to put it that way, which is Russia. They don't want to let go of that. That was the profitable model for them. What's the model? What's the motive for talking about Brazil? We've never had any conflict with Brazil, even though they've had a socialist government for years and until last year. The United States and Brazil never had hostile relations. You understand? They've had all these leaders, Dilma and Lula, came to power claiming that they are going to throw off the reins of imperialism and capitalist exploitation. And what did they end up doing? They took the state oil company, Petrobras, and they used it as their own cash register, taking the money out and buying shit for themselves and their buddies. And in the case of Venezuela, you had a country that was the richest in Latin America, the greatest oil reserves in the world. And what are you getting? Basically, some of the worst hunger you've seen in your life on a massive scale. It's starvation. You're seeing people that are fleeing into Colombia, which is a war-torn country. They want to get out of Venezuela because there ain't no food there. This was one of the richest countries for decades. This is what socialism does. And instead of focusing on that, instead of focusing on this sea change of trend right now in Latin America, and I put up a video just now, if you go to Gold Like a Leopard, it concerns the real news network, which in my opinion, they might as well change their names to the Real Fake News, because they're a socialist organization out of Baltimore. And you might say, well, why are you picking on one small left-wing outlet? When you see the rest of this series, you're going to see that it's interlinked. All these left-wing outlets are interlinked, and they're cooperating with each other in order to claim that nothing is happening in Venezuela, nothing is happening in Cuba, nothing is happening in Brazil. It's all a bunch of capitalist propaganda. That's what they're trying to say. They will cover up all of these scandals that are happening in those countries. And today is not going to be that long of a broadcast, I can assure you, because I mean, first of all, it was on short notice. Only a few people got notice anyway, but I didn't see it fit to just let the day go without mentioning it. And I need help from other people from those countries, if they can tune in, or people who have experience with this, to help bring their stories to light. Because what we're seeing, once you see some of these videos that I'm going to make, you're going to see that while the mainstream media in our country is ignoring entirely Venezuela, Cuba, and Brazil, they're ignoring it. There are leftist outlets that are perfectly willing to go there and misrepresent what's going on to their benefit. And all they're doing is they're doing a stalling tactic. They're basically trying to say a country that is financially insolvent and collapsing under its own weight of debt and inefficiency and government coercion, like Venezuela, they're trying to say, well, it's a ginned up crisis. It's all a bunch of nonsense. Or they're trying to say that the opposition is violent. Well, how can they get away with that? It's mind-boggling. What you will see that, as in the first video, where you have the Real News, which is not the only outlet, but it's one that I kind of focus on a little. They take Colin Kaepernick, and I'm sorry if I don't see you in the chat, Zero. I know that you're probably there, but I don't have the window up because of the early interference. I'm kind of running this on the seat of my pants right now, but Colin Kaepernick gets endless headlines. For what? For being an asshole to the entire fan base of his city and his country by sitting on the bench and pretending to take a stand. It was in my opinion, a cynical ploy to get his starting job back in San Francisco. But they give him endless attention and they lionize him. I went to a game last year. It was a game here it was between my Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns. I saw some idiot, this 15-year-old kid, a black kid, but a 15-year-old kid wearing a Colin Kaepernick jersey, number 7, to a game that he was not appearing in. All for what? You know, this is a person who, a couple years ago, he was basically kissing his arm every time he made an amazing play. Now, I'm not going to say that he hasn't done anything well. I mean, he's gone. First of all, he's had a couple accomplishments as a player, but he's pound for pound one of the more mediocre quarterbacks that's been in the NFL for the past few years. Meanwhile, you know, so they lionize his cause. What are they doing when it regards Miguel Cabrera, who is possibly, in my opinion, I don't know if any of you are MLB fans, but Miggy is one of the greatest hitters of all time. He is, in my opinion, the greatest hitter since Tony Gwynn, and I remember Tony Gwynn very well from the 90s, playing for the Padres. So he goes on Michigan media, the Detroit Free Press and MLive, and he says to them, look, my family is being threatened. We are being forced to pay protection money so that my mom doesn't get kidnapped. What does the U.S. media do? Almost crickets. You know, there's a few outlets. USA Today did run something small because they're part of the Detroit Free Press network. You don't see anything in the mass communications media, which is CNN, MSNBC. Fox News did do a little something, but not nearly enough attention. Not nearly enough attention to the plight of one person. Now, I would say the lives of celebrities, lives of the rest of the population. There's, you know, it goes without saying that the majority of the population of Venezuela is probably in worse straits right now than Miggy Cabrera's family. But let's put it all into perspective here. I'm saying that one of the greatest athletes of our time is completely ignored in the media for something that's actually happening to his family. Meanwhile, you have Colin Kaepernick. There's people all over the media, not just the left-wing media, not just the political media. They're trying to get Colin Kaepernick a job in the NFL so he can sit on the bench and not stand for the national anthem. It's not that big of a deal, guys. You can let him not play football. You can let him play, shuffleboard for a year. It doesn't matter. It's not a humanitarian issue. But they're treating it as such. They're treating it as an indignity, the same way, by the way, that President Obama claimed that if voters would not vote for Hillary Clinton, he would consider it a personal insult to his legacy. It's the same thing. People are using these people as symbolic martyrs for a cause that is basically meaningless. That's what the Colin Kaepernick issue is. That's what the Barack Obama issue was for 8 years. It's all symbolic bullshit. Because at the bottom of this issue is a country, Venezuela, that is on the brink of mass starvation. And we're not even getting into the other issues that are tied to this. You have in Brazil a regime that went ham on the national oil company, Petrobras. Okay, I don't speak so well Portuguese, but I can free translate, and I'll bring up some of the news. I'll try to do this on the fly, you know, just like I always do. You know, I'm kind of doing it Cernovich style, right? It says, Lula is the president of Brazil, is condenado no caso do triplex. He's been condemned or convicted of using the services of somebody for renovating a 3-level apartment. And there are 4 more trials awaiting him, okay, for corruption. This happened Wednesday. He's been sentenced to 9.5 years in prison for the crime of passive corruption, they call it in Portuguese. That's what is going on in Brazil. And the left, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do that video next time. I did the first video today on the Kaepernick Cabrera imbalance, and the next one is going to be on Brazil, corruption in Brazil versus corruption in Israel. How does the left cover it? When it's Israel, you know what? I accept people don't have to like Israel. It's fine. But when you cover the same issue, corruption at the top level of one country and corruption at the top level of another country, don't you agree that it should be equal? I can't see you in the chat because I don't have the chat up, but I'm assuming that you're nodding. You have to stay consistent if you really have an objection to corruption. And I said in my previous video, the non-live video, that I think there's a few progressives that are true to their principles, like H.A. Goodman and Tim Black, that are plenty interested in keeping politicians honest. But those are the exception to the rule. They really are. The majority of them are perfectly willing to see these scumbags just steal people's confidence and their belief in a utopian future that's just not going to come. Now, that's just Brazil. In Venezuela, this is going to be another video. You have Telesur, which is the state media conglomerate. They are portraying these protesters as violent rebels. And the Real News Network and other socialist outlets, they're ignoring it, and they're claiming that it's the U.S. fomenting a coup or whatever. The military is completely under control of these socialists. They have been for years. Chavez, he purged the Venezuelan military of most of these American sympathizers. So he has a military that's largely loyal to him. He has a lot of Cuban advisors. A coup would imply that the military is doing it. Here you see hundreds of thousands of people going on the streets and lighting trash cans on fire, burning tires in the streets. And they're trying to portray it as a Yankee coup, that these protesters are violent. Let me tell you something. The same networks, what did they say about Ferguson? They said it was a popular protest. What did they say? Well, they say the same thing about Palestinian protests in the West Bank. I'm fine with them believing that violent protest is legitimate, but it should be legitimate on both sides. If it's happening in Venezuela and it's legitimate, then you can say that it's legitimate in these other places like Ferguson and in England and all these other places where it's happened. And then you know, you have the, you know, speaking of which, England, that's going to be the last video, and I'm not going to be going on for much longer. Dade. You have this British leader, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn, that is being dolled up like a, basically, he's like a teen idol, even though he's like over 60 years old. They're treating him like he's the next coming of Oasis over there in England. And what does he do? He blames this tragic apartment fire or apartment complex fire, the Grenfell Tower. He blames it on deregulation. Well, he spends the whole time blaming it on deregulation. Meanwhile, it's public housing. It is something that was designed defectively back in the 70s by the government to house poor people in basically a warehouse with couches. That's what it was. And this Jeremy Corbyn, he's sitting across the couch from Naomi Klein, another disgusting piece of trash. And you can take it to the bank on that. I don't care what you say. She is trash of the lowest order, in my opinion. This socialist bitch from Canada who is calling on progressives to rise up against Trump and whatever. And if it was only about Trump, I wouldn't care. But what she's doing is deliberate misrepresentation. They are taking this man who is an IRA sympathizer, the terrorist group that bombed his own people, the British people, he is a sympathizer of theirs. He's a sympathizer of Hezbollah and Hamas, which are Middle Eastern terrorist groups. A sympathizer. He's not saying, you know, leave them alone. He's saying, yeah, they're friends of ours. He's been caught on tape saying that. He fraternizes with them. They're portraying him as the savior of the working class, and we can't let that happen. We can't let them go unanswered. And you can look on Sargon and all these other streams to hear more about Jeremy Corbyn, but I think I don't know a lot of other people that are trying to tie them all together, and that's what I'm trying to do. You know, I have to set you know, the product that I'm putting out apart from, you know, the rest of YouTube and the rest of the mainstream, just because if I'm saying the same thing as other people, you know, everybody was talking yesterday about that gay Muslim wedding and that dude that had a baby and whatever. That's fine. You know, you can talk about whatever interests you. But we're talking about what I'm calling the second fall of the Berlin Wall, in quotation marks, because this is a major event. And due to the influence of these outcast communists from the past on the media, it's all been covered up. And it's really a tragedy. It's a tragedy for the people involved, because if the media was covering it properly and attributing the proper weight to what's going on, I don't think that these you know, these tragedies going on in Venezuela would be as acute, because we would probably see a different sort of approach to dealing with their government. I mean, obviously, the United States is not handling their government with kids' gloves. Even the Obama administration was not a friend of the Venezuelan government, because they were just so hostile and so nasty that not even Barack Obama could kiss their ass. That he had an ass like a porcupine. So instead, the leftist media is trying to bury it. I'm not going to let it happen if I can help it, but I do need help from people. I need help from people to spread the story, even if it's not what I'm doing, to spread the story of Venezuela. And Miguel Cabrera's mother, I have it in the link to the other video. I can attach it below too. We have to spread that story, the story of these people that are feeling the full boot of socialist dictatorship on their necks. So everybody have a great night. I know there's not a lot of you. There's actually very, very few of you, but you know, and I could do better next time. All I need is more time to prep. But I promise you there's going to be plenty of interesting content to come. And not just regarding this, you know, there's more stuff, other topics. Of course, I cover Obamacare as much as I can. And I think that's what I think is important now. If there's very few people following it who care, then maybe it's because it's not important to them. Maybe it's because I don't present it in an interesting enough manner. But I think that watching a country melt down before your eyes doesn't really depend on whether my channel is attractive or not. It's about what's going on. It's about the people suffering. It's about the lessons that we're learning from history only through our own experience. So have a great night. It's bold like a leopard, and we're bold and alive. Maybe next time there will be a live stream where I don't fuck up the feed.